Hey y'all, Zach McDonald, your real estate agent with Real Property Associates, and today we are going to talk about house hacking. I've had multiple people ask me more about my own situation because I've mentioned in some of these videos that I rent out my basement. And people have been asking me, how do you do that? How do you make money by renting out the house or renting out parts of the house that you're currently living in? So this video is not going to be the how to buy commercial real estate, how to fix and flip a house, how to buy rental properties, how to anything aside from how do you rent out your house and live in your house and occupy it, but also make some cash flow. So we're going to talk a little bit about that here in this video. And I think for me, there are a few more simple, tried and true ways to do this, and I'll share the first one. The first one is having roommates. My wife and I are a great example of this house hacking idea. When we first were married, or a few months before, we reached out to, it was actually a Facebook post, and we just said, hey, does anybody have or know of a mother-in-law apartment that's available for rent? Because for us, we thought, well, we could help somebody else pay their mortgage, and maybe it will be a little bit more cost-effective for us and a little different environment, right? A more traditional neighborhood than renting in an apartment. So we gave it a shot. And we had a friend let us know, hey, we're thinking about doing this. They had us over to the house. We got to see what they were planning, and we decided that we were gonna go in. So we said, yeah, let's do it. And we had a great experience renting this mother-in-law. We got to know them. We got to build a relationship with them, right? And we also got to have a great house, meet some of the neighbors, and we've built some great relationships with some of the neighbors that we're still friends with to this day. And so for us, it was an amazing experience to be able to rent somebody else's mother-in-law. And when we purchased our house, we decided that we were going to do something similar, or wanted to do something similar, and we were trying to figure out what that would look like. We weren't married to the idea, but for us, there were a few different options, and I think these same options apply to anybody, or at least a lot of people that have a single family house. So you've got to be able to adapt these principles to different scenarios, so I don't want to go through every single possible scenario, but I think there's a few general principles that you can apply, and some of them may or may not work in your situation. The first one is to have roommates. If I was a single person and I had a house, I would want to have a house. I would have roommates because I could rent out each room and most likely be close to paying my mortgage. Now, of course, I need to be able to afford this house in the first place. So I don't want to buy a house that I can't afford and then have roommates to hopefully pay the mortgage, because I don't want to have a situation where I don't have roommates and I can't pay my bills. So I think for everybody and any client in this situation, I always tell them, you got to be able to pay your bills. It needs to be reasonable. And then if you can make extra money on top of that, that's amazing, right? And you can put that right back into the stock market or start saving up maybe for the next real estate purchase. But I think the first easy option is to have roommates. And in our situation, that's what we have going on in our house. We have somebody that rents a bedroom and gets, utilizes the downstairs more often than not. But, we have more of a communal living situation in our house. And we've had a few different people live with us over the past 4 or 5 years. But that's how it's set up at our place. We don't have a formal ADU. We don't have an ADU is an attached dwelling unit. We'll talk about that here in a sec. And we don't have a detached unit. We never really wanted to get into what we're going to talk about here in a sec, and that's the short-term rentals. And the biggest reason we didn't want to do short-term rentals is because we have little kids, and my wife's there, and we didn't want to just have a whole bunch of people in and out of our house having little kids. We now have 4 little kids. We only had 2, 2.5, almost 3 at the time. But we were thinking through some of these things, and we decided just personally that we didn't want to have the transient living, right? People in and out, partially from the headache, but also because of just safety, to be honest. So I think for us, we crossed the short-term rentals off, but it could be a legitimate option. And I have some clients that have used their basement spaces or a bedroom or a couch or heck, maybe a tent in the backyard as a short-term rental. And there are people looking to rent on Airbnb, VRBO. There's lots of different options. And you could use part of your house for that. And I think there's more upside to that. For the roommate situation, it's not going to be as lucrative, and it's not for us, but it's nice. And for the short-term situation, you may be able to make quite a bit more money on a regular basis, but you'll have a lot more to manage, and you'll also have to deal with some of those other factors we mentioned. So if you're in a different situation than I found myself in, you may go with the short-term rental option. And again, I'm not thinking and talking about vacation properties right now. I'm not saying you should go buy a rental property and turn it into a VRBO, which again, that's a different video. But in this case, if you're living in the house, you could do that to help supplement and pay for the mortgage. House hacking, that's what it's called. I think the other main way you're going to do this is by building an ADU, which is an attached dwelling unit, so a separate apartment, so to speak. And you would have, again, it would be like the roommate experience, but you would have a little bit more separation, and you'd also have most likely a little bit higher rent that you could charge. So the ADU, attached dwelling unit, is going to be attached to the house, right? But you're going to have that separation, and that's what we experienced early on in marriage. I think the DADU, or detached accessory dwelling unit, would be a separate building on the property. So in a lot of places around the Seattle area, if you can't yet, you will be able to soon build a cottage or even a couple in certain situations in your backyard. So I think the zoning is going to continue to become more and more flexible here over the next few years, mainly because there's just nowhere to build. And we're trying to solve this density situation. Where do we put people? People want to buy, people need a place to live. How do we build more housing? And so I think we're going to see more and more of this. But building, if it's not already there, building that additional unit in your backyard might be a great option, right? It'll be expensive up front. If you have equity in your house, you may be able to take some of that equity out and use it to finance a build in the back, and then you could pay yourself back over time with the rents from that other space. But I think that's another legitimate option, and that'll give you the most detached experience, so to speak. I think these other situations, you're going to be a lot more involved, whereas the ADU, the DADU, you're going to have a lot more of the autonomy, and so will the tenant. But all of these, I think, are great options. Whether you chose to have a roommate, short-term rental, or a DADU ADU, I think these are great ways that you can supplement your income and supplement and hopefully pay for the mortgage. And in our case, we're able to cover a percentage or a portion of the mortgage. We can't cover the entire thing right now. But it's great. It's really nice to be able to add that to the personal budget, pay for groceries or whatever it is for the month. And I think anybody could benefit from that. So if you're not somebody who really enjoys your privacy and you have to have your alone time, and you're able to be around other people and live in that environment, you can be the one essentially that owns the property and is living there, but then you're able to have other people help pay for the mortgage. There's a few other unconventional ways that you could utilize your property to make a little extra income. And again, I'm not going into every single one, but there's a few that I've heard of more recently that are kind of fascinating to me. And one of those is having your house essentially be a camp spot. So I've had some clients mention that they've gone and stayed at other people's properties and just camped there. And there's lots of different sites. Hip Camp's one of them, where you can just go and literally use somebody else's backyard as a camp spot. So my brother-in-law has a really cool property, and he could easily do something like this, where he rents out camp spots on his property, and people would pay money to stay there. I mean, I've stayed there, and it's great. And I don't tell him, but I would pay to stay there. But that's a great option, right, for generating some additional revenue. And that's super detached, super easy. There's a few basic things you'll need to do. Maybe have a toilet or something like that. But heck, you could even let somebody park their RV there. And then another interesting one is a dog play area. Some people want their dog to be able to play privately for whatever reason. Maybe their dog's a little bit unfriendly with other dogs. But Sniff Spot is an app where you can go and you can sign up to let people play in their yards. And I had a client do this. He said, my house has a registered Sniff Spot. I'm like, what? What is a Sniff Spot? I don't have any dogs, and so I'm not as familiar with some of these apps. But Sniff Spot seems to be a pretty cool way to generate a little additional income as well. So not only can you make money using the inside of your house, but you can also make money using the outside. And there may, if you are extremely enterprising, be options to do both all at the same time. Thanks so much for watching this video as we talk about house hacking and ways to make a little additional income in the house that you occupy. If you have questions about buying or selling real estate, I'm happy to be a resource for you. And if this video brought some value to you, please share it with somebody else.